Hello, and welcome to Tech Talks, sponsored by Vox Network Solutions. I'm Krista Arthur. I am part of the Vox security practice here, and I'm going to be your host for today's roundtable called Why Cybersecurity Programs Fail. This is such a hot topic. Why is there, with more investment, more awareness, we are still failing in our cybersecurity programs? So just before we get started, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Vox. Let me take a step back. Let me tell you about TechTalks. TechTalks is not a sales oriented program. It's really about community sharing. It's about education, collaboration, and communication. So we are so glad that you're here today to join us. So now let me tell you a little bit about Vox Network Solutions. We help people prosper. That's our tagline. We help people prosper. We know that it's technology that helps to run the organizations, but it's the people that support the technology. And so we support the people and the technology with our 6 practices: consulting, contact center, collaboration, network, security, and also managed services. In fact, we believe so much in our managed services that our promise to you is that if we don't meet our KPIs, you get 1 month of service free. All right. So let me just tell you a little bit about the format of today's roundtable. We're going to talk for about 30 minutes. You will have an opportunity for Q&A at the end, but if there's questions that come up during the roundtable, just go ahead and put them in the chat. Kyle, who is also with Vox, will be collecting those questions and we will get to them. There's also going to be poll questions that Kyle is going to be sharing. So please answer the poll questions. We want to know how your company is doing with its cybersecurity program. All right, so let me make the introduction. So first we have Nick Colensis, who is our Chief Technical Officer here at Vox Network Solutions. Nick is an industry visionary and thought leader with over 20 years of experience helping business clients understand forward-thinking technologies and how they apply to evolving business scenarios. So thank you, Nick, for being here. Next, we have James Rothman, who is the Vox Network Solutions Virtual Chief Information Security Officer. He is also a technology and business visionary with executive and hands-on experience establishing and maintaining enterprise vision, strategy, and programs to ensure information assets and technologies are adequately protected. James has worked with 50 corporations such as Xerox and Atos, and as well has worked with multinational corporations such as Westfield Group. So thank you, James, for being here.
Nice to be here.
And our special guest is Daniel DeSantis, CISSP. He is the Director of CISO Advisory for Cisco Americas. He has 25 years of experience as a tech founder, Chief Technology Officer, and as a leader working with many of the largest companies in the world. He rejoined Cisco in 2020 from Focal Point Data Risk, where he co-led efforts across advisory, identity, and cyber workforce development practices. Thank you, Dan, for being here.
Nice to be here, Krista.
Right. And thank our audience, for everybody else, for being here too. We know that you have a lot to do during the day, so thank you for taking the time out. So let's start with the elephant in the room. Actually, this question is going to be for Dan. And the elephant in the room is really ransomware. In fact, I got a call from one of our insurance partners on Monday about an organization, one of their customers, who had $1 million in ransom. So this is the elephant in the room. And they're not only just the local businesses, but the Colonial Pipeline hack, JBS Meatpacking, hospitals, municipalities, and again, small businesses. In fact, on June 3rd, in an interview with the Wall Street Journal, FBI Director Christopher Wray compared the current attacks with a 9/11 event. In the article, he says, quote, "There are a lot of parallels. There's a lot of importance and a lot of focus by us on disruption and prevention. There's a shared responsibility, not just across government agencies, but across the private sector and even the average American. So Dan, do you agree with this statement? And if so, what brought ransomware to the level of being a national emergency?
Yeah, so I agree emphatically with the statement. And I mean, just within the last 24 hours, we have fresh news on this topic, right? Putin and Biden got together to talk about critical infrastructure being off limits. And critical infrastructure has a fairly wide scope. Clearly, the Colonial Pipeline is fresh in mind. So it is a situation now. And I think what has really come to fruition is something a lot of us who've been in security for a long time are talking about. It's like, hey, listen, you have to get some of these basics down. It's things like segmentation. You can't ignore security in certain environments, especially things like the OT environments. Because now, because we're so heavily dependent, and there's many good things that come from this on internet capabilities. And it has moved into environments that were traditionally cordoned off from the internet, that we can affect human life. There are stories about ransomware actually causing outages in medical facilities where it has imperiled human life. So this is a very serious conversation. I think the Colonial Pipeline, something of that magnitude. I happened to be in Charleston at the time with my family, and we were driving throughout the city. And we weren't too terrified because it would have been a bad place to be trapped for a while, but all the pumps were shut down. And then you started seeing behavior sort of exhibit at the pumps. First of all, lines formed, but then some human behavior that was worrisome about hoarding and people putting gasoline in plastic bags and things like that. So it's a very serious issue that affects human behavior. It affects society. And we're seeing a big ripple effect there. We're also seeing this manifest itself in board level conversations between CISOs. In fact, I just hosted this earlier this week, a roundtable of CISOs in the Fortune 500. This was the top topic. And a lot of the conversation was around, do you or do you not pay a ransom? Do you enable the economy? And what's interesting is there were some polarizing views in that conversation. Some say, no, absolutely not, never. We're never going to pay it. Others are saying, well, we have to role play that because we don't know if half the country is shut down in terms of a gas crisis or what have you, or we can't operate in ORs. Then what do? Right? You have to get your business back online. So it's a tough situation, and really in many ways, in the conversations I have with CISOs, they have to inform and educate the other leaders, including the board, on all the scenarios, and they need to test those discussions without a doubt. I'm sure the other team here has some James or Nick has some other ideas on this, but boy, this is a hot one.
Just so we're clear, we're not recommending that you pay the ransom. We can't do that because there's
absolutely
big,
right.
You could be in a lot of trouble. So officially, we do not recommend that you pay the ransom. But I understand that organizations are having that conversation. To your point about keeping the business running. So James, kind of following up on what Dan was talking about, we've known about ransomware for decades. We've been talking about ransomware, cyber liability insurance, so we've known about this. What is it about the current versions of ransomware that make it so devastating? Why are we having such a hard time battling it?
Sure. Well, let's first go back in time. The first ransomware attack was rudimentary at best. I mean, it involved the distribution of floppy disks to a bunch of AIDS researchers, but it set the stage for the evolution of ransomware into the sophisticated attacks that are carried out today. So the early ransomware developers, they typically wrote their own encryption code, whereas today's attackers are increasingly reliant on off-the-shelf libraries that are much harder to crack. And they're leveraging more sophisticated methods of delivery, such as spear phishing campaigns, rather than the traditional phishing email blasts, which are frequently filtered out by email spam filters that exist today. In addition, the attacks of today are utilizing far tougher to crack encryption algorithms like RSA encryption and that sort of thing that was found in the past. So, and sophisticated attackers are developing toolkits that can be downloaded and deployed by attackers with less technical skills nowadays. So anyone could be an attacker. Some of the most advanced cyber criminals today are monetizing ransomware by offering basically ransomware as a service programs, which have led to the rise in prominence of well-known ransomwares like CryptoLocker, CryptoWall, Locky, that sort of thing. Crypto wall alone has generated more than, I think it's about $400 million in revenue that we know of. So this is really big business.
Yeah, I think one of the things that a lot of organizations underestimate is that they're not dealing with individuals, they're dealing with organized crime syndicates, right? Nation states, very sophisticated business models with even like a customer service arm of some of these organized crime syndicates, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
they're collaborating in a way that many of us are jealous of in corporate America. I mean, they're using collaboration tools. They're building dashboards. There's actually a New York Times piece on this not too long ago. It's pretty eye-opening.
It's big business. It's organized big business with hierarchies and organizational charts about who does what. It's incredible.
Yeah.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but maybe I do. I don't have the numbers in front of me. What's the average on the ransomware? Dan, James, or Nick, do you guys know? How much are they really making with ransomware? Do we estimate? Or are we in the billion?
It ranges. It's typically six figures. I mean, yesterday there's a news story about an insurance company that I won't mention that paid what they believe is now a record ransom of $40 million. And so, which just is extraordinary, but in terms of potential losses that they would have incurred had they not paid the ransom, this again gets back to that question. Again, not advocating for it, right?
Yeah.
But don't forget also, these are only the numbers. I'm sorry, I was just going to say, these are the numbers that are reported.
That's right.
I mean, there are tons of companies that aren't going to report this information because of, embarrassment and that sort of thing. So truthfully, we don't know what the real numbers are.
Yeah.
So this next question is for Nick. Vox is known for supporting organizations with collaboration, communication, and contact center. With the pandemic, a lot of organizations have moved their operations into the cloud. Should organizations be concerned about ransomware in the cloud environment? And what can they do to protect themselves? I guess kind of a leading question there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No. And I think there is a little bit of an assumption by many customers, not all, that moving to the cloud or moving their data to the cloud is more secure or less of a threat. And we typically see that, again, not all customers, but we do hear that from some customers. And while the public cloud could have or may have stronger security in their data centers than you do in your own data center, there's still the surround, exposure issues, right, with your data. So there's still customer responsibilities that are required, whether it's in the cloud or in your data center. So things don't really change, just the responsibilities shift. And really having the accountability, right? So is it, who's accountable? Is it Amazon? Is it Microsoft in a public cloud? And where that accountability is. So at the end of the day, it really comes down to like 6 pillars. It's like building a foundation, identity and access management, detection, infrastructure protection, data protection, and incident response, which isn't much different than what you should be doing in your own data center, except now it's in the cloud. And, you will hear there is maybe even some more complexity when moving to the cloud from a security standpoint, because you do now have to interface with that public cloud provider and ensure you have the proper communication, the proper framework in place, and how that works together. And at the end of the day, with this acceleration into, of businesses moving into the cloud, I see it as an increased target or an increased threat, right? They all know everyone's going to the cloud. So there's this, increased target, it's one big target now. It's like, okay, everyone is using S3 or, OneDrive, so all this exposure is there. And, when it's your own public data center, it's a little bit more hidden per se, but this is out there and they all know companies are moving to the cloud because of the pandemic. So
yeah. What about?
And it's important to surround yourself with people like James. So I'm very fortunate to have someone like James to help protect, myself, because as a CTO, we're really looking at efficiencies, moving the business, right? Really moving on how we can, speed to market, doing all these things. And, sometimes security gets, it's an afterthought. And that's the reality from a business perspective. So
that's an excellent point, that there is a balance, because you can be so locked down that you can't, nobody can get any work done. It's just too inefficient.
Exactly.
And so maybe that's where some of the, we're relying on, some of the criminals maybe are relying on some of that, they can't be so locked down,
Exactly.
How do we find that balance, do you think? And this is a question for all three of you. How do we find the balance between security and running a business that's efficient?
One of the faults in the past was that the security department were known as, no, they say no to everything. No, you can't have access to this and all that. And that's just the way it was. And as time goes on, security and IT are becoming more part of the business, where you have people interacting between the business to understand what are you trying to achieve. So there's a balance. Obviously, there's a balance between security and functionality, productivity, and that sort of thing. So it's really, really important, I believe, that the IT department and security, of course, speak to the business to figure out exactly what it is they're trying to achieve, basically on both sides, what they're trying to achieve. So it's positively, it's a balance. Don't get me wrong, there are some times that certain things are a little bit more difficult, additional layers of authentication, that sort of thing. But as time goes on, we're getting more and more technologies and processes and things like that to help out, such that there really isn't this roadblock like there used to be in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
James, I would just add, and I mean, it sounds like Nick, you and James have a great working relationship, and I mean, that used to be the kind of role model in all of our customers and partners, in terms of how information technology and security need to work hand in hand and present to the business solutions. And oftentimes we see is a lot of times, and this goes back to that no CISO idea, is that CISOs don't have the voice that they need to have. Many of them are struggling with this. And especially if they report to a CIO or a CTO, they really need that air cover to say, hey, no, listen, we're going to enable the business by deploying cloud, whatever technology, but security is here as a partner with us. And that way we do it securely, and we don't compromise ultimately our customer data, our crown jewels, et cetera, et cetera. The only other comment I had on that, and Nick had me thinking about the cloud, but the cloud's great. It's elastic. It allows us to adapt fast. It was necessary for COVID. But the big frustration I've seen, on James, I'm sure you've seen some of this as well, is that a lot of security organizations had to retool on the fly. They built their run books around monolithic data center centric environments. Now all of a sudden they've got all this stuff up in the cloud, and in some instances, sort of the analogous tools weren't there, and so that represented a pretty profound challenge for security practitioners.
Yeah. We typically refer to the whole pandemic from our standpoint as the largest POC, proof of concept, for a lot of applications, real-time communications. And you're right. And Dan, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of cleanup that needs to happen. And who knows how much exposure has happened as well that people don't know about.
Mm-hmm. So moving on now, according to Gartner, worldwide security and risk management spending will exceed $150 billion this year. A lot of the spending will be in the public cloud and software as a service. So, and this question is for everyone, has the failure to adequately protect organizations' infrastructure just been about spending? Are we not spending enough? Yeah.
I think generally, the more that's spent, there's this myth of the more that's spent equals the more security a company will be. It's nonsense. I mean, it actually, a lot of people just throw money at things like technology, that sort of thing, saying, hey, we're going to be A-OK. But the reality is, according to research, there is no direct correlation between spending on cybersecurity, or as a proportion of total IT spending, and success of a company's cybersecurity program. Some companies that spend a lot of money on cybersecurity are actually underperforming the rest of the market. Typically, it's because they're not protecting the right assets or the company's crown jewels, that sort of thing. Very often companies have this, like a blanket approach, that they're going to protect everything the same way, which is really not the way to do things, right? So, throwing money at the problem, it seems like a good idea in the short term, but it's not always the case.
Yeah. Can throwing money be like, like ad hoc, right? Not really having a plan, but just like, well, let's just do this. Let's just add this technology. Let's add this.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, an ad hoc approach is, to funding, it won't be an effective solution long term. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, and I think we did a study on this. Nick, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say this ties back into what James was referring about being close to the business. I think it's so imperative because if you're making security decisions and you're not working with the business together, either A, you're going to overspend or underspend, or you're going to spend it in the wrong areas. Mm-hmm. So really having that tight alignment with the business and what they're trying to achieve. I think it ties so closely to that and the spending and the budgeting and figuring out what's right, so.
And Dan, you were saying that you did a study recently?
We did in 2020. It was serendipitous given SolarWinds and COVID and all kinds of other crazy stuff that's been going on. But we determined that it is important to keep your environment up to date. And so there's a lot of different aspects of that. So investing in your portfolio is essential. Lifecycle management is essential. But other things that are equally important, and this was our findings, we interviewed about 4,000 companies. Integration, automation, training, all of those things were key factors in the viability of a security program and the elevation of the security posture. So great that you're spending a lot of money on tools, and there's lots of great tools out there. Our company makes a fair bit of them. But if you're not integrating and you're not automating, you're not testing and training, then it is a recipe for disaster. And let's not forget the other aspect of training, which is, and this goes back to your first question about ransomware, we still have a lot of people clicking on links.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this is kind of bringing all of these questions together. Why are we failing? Is it just the training? Is it all of it? I mean, if you could just say, this is why cybersecurity programs are failing, it's because of this, what would that be?
There's a multitude. I mean, it's a lack of awareness, lack of adoption, organization, planning, lack of financial resources, inadequate technology, human capital. I mean, it's really, there's a whole bunch of things that basically, that impact the actual security posture of an organization. So it's a whole multitude of things.
I'll be a bit more polarizing. Just a quick comment on that topic. I can't tell you how many customers I have met with, and they'll tell me, hey, listen, I'm in the retail business, or I'm in the food distribution business. I'm not in the security business. And so what I think James is alluding to here is there has to be a sea change in how companies view their technology stacks, their adoption of technology, and the security of that infrastructure. They have to see it as being a part of that sort of living organism. It can't be just this sort of separated, isolated domain. It is the classic brakes on a race car. You don't build a race car without putting brakes on it.
Yeah.
That simple.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. It comes down to humans, right? If nothing's 100% secure, we're not perfect. So you always have to, have contingency plans and, at least have a framework and understand that nothing's perfect, but at least if you have a plan of action and being able to respond properly and have the right resources and tools surrounding you, you can get through it, right? Or at least be less susceptible.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that maybe people haven't been taking the threat seriously? That it can happen to them, it happens to other people.
I agree, Krista. Yeah. Very often when I talk to different companies, they'll say to me, "We've never been breached." And then I say, "Well, how do you know that?" And they have no way of knowing. They don't have tools in place. They have no idea. So, it's one of these, I hate saying this, but it's one of these expressions that I like to use all the time, where you've got two types of companies: those that have been breached and those that don't know that they've been breached. That's it. Those are the only two types of companies out there. So again, it's one of these things that people don't necessarily understand the risk.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to also be okay with failure, and we have to learn from it.
Absolutely.
Our InfoSec team here, we have a relatively new 2 or 3 years now, Chief Trust Officer Brad Arkin, And the whole InfoSec team has been reading a great book called Black Box Thinking, which is a reference to the airline industry black box. It's a wonderful read, but it talks about learning from failure. And so this whole notion of we've been compromised, and then there's this knee-jerk reaction, lots of spending. I can't tell you how many hundreds of millions, probably certainly billions of dollars that have spent post-breach. And then we kind of go back to normal. We clean it up, we remediate, and then, oh, that can't happen again, and then we're going to go back. We really haven't learned from it. And I'm not saying that's every company by any stretch of the imagination, but there has to be this notion, and you have to create this awareness in the executive leadership team as well as the board that it's probably already happened. It's going to happen again, and we have to test for it over and over again so that we're aware of the ramifications.
I think that's a difficult conversation to have, right? Because the business leaders, you're right. I don't want to ever have happen again. It's on your watch. They want to kind of pass the blame instead of looking at how the organization is structured for resilience. I think, and you said the name of the book is Black Box Thinking.
Yeah, great read. Matthew Syed is the author, so highly recommend it.
So what about training in the IT department? At least in the mid-market, maybe not in the enterprise so much, but, and Nick, I'm going to actually put this one over to you. A lot of the security is left to the IT guys, and their responsibility is uptime. And do you think that that's also maybe a gap for these organizations?
Yeah, some of it too. Yeah, I think it is. I think part of it right now is, security awareness training, ensuring the end users what to look out for. And it's that repetitive motion, right? So, typically we find customers will do like a 15-minute little security training online, and everyone's clicking through it, not really paying attention. And it's like, oh, yeah, I figured it out, or I know it. The reality is we need more touch points when it comes to security, especially security training for these end users. And just so it gets reinforced and built upon. And those are some of the programs that we do internally and that we do for customers as well. And, because a lot of them, it's like, okay, it's an HR rolled out program. It's done for 15, 30 minutes. And then, okay, we'll see you in 2022. Thank you. All the employees got certified for security. We got the rubber stamp. But the reality is there needs to be more touch points when it comes to training, especially for the end user community, because it is, it does come down to the IT department to do that, and that's not really the place for them. Most of them don't have that training capacity to handle that.
It's a heavy load. James or Dan, do you have anything else to add?
Sure. What I was going to say is, you want to train your IT staff with the information required to recognize and react to cyber threats, because this isn't something, typically IT folks, they want to get things to work and to function, to operate, but they weren't trained for cyber threats and how to deal with them. So basically, this is going to mitigate risk, and it's going to embed a culture of cybersecurity awareness within the organization or within the IT department.
Yeah, I think culture is a key word, and it has to be top down.
Yeah.
And the only thing is, and this conversation, it gets really interesting as it relates to things like DevSecOps, where, not only we're talking about end user training, and that going back to that notion of not clicking on the link, but that sort of start left, forget about shifting left with code development, start left when we're building code. There's a lot of code being written, especially up in the cloud now.
Yeah.
Let's write that code with a secure framework, secure, and have a management process or an SDLC process that allows me to revisit that code, make sure it's not flawed. This is top of mind for third-party risk programs. We have an extremely mature program here at Cisco around securing our code, because we don't want to be the next SolarWinds. But we also use a lot of code. And so making sure that our suppliers that are writing that code that we're using in our environment, that it's safe and secure is absolutely top of mind.
I think coming back to the culture and having it come from the top down, really educating leadership. Some of the issues that I know we've run into is helping the director of IT, empowering him or her to then go to leadership with, we really need to have a discussion about this. So then it comes from the middle up And that does seem to create tension and a gap where we do need the leadership of the organization to embrace security. I think that's really what I'm hearing from you guys.
Yeah. No doubt about it.
So moving on. So has anyone read, there's the new executive order by the Biden administration on cybersecurity. The Trump administration also signed an executive order. Do you think that these executive orders are helpful to the business community? And Dan, I'll start with you.
So I think it's a good message to be set at the top. And it's going back to the earlier conversation we had. The key here is enforcement. Mm-hmm. It's getting folks. I mean, when Trump issued his EO years ago, ultimately all of the federal agencies still were building their programs around NIST and MITRE ATT&CK.
Yeah.
And but the constructs are good. Same thing with Biden's new executive order, which embraces zero trust. We've all, practitioners, CISOs, CIOs, CTOs, we've been talking about the notion of segmentation, zero trust, least privilege access for many, many years since the Jericho Forum was established. And so now that it's getting that visibility, that's good. But the key now is for it to have teeth, for it to have funding. Now, we have seen recently, there's a gentleman on my team who was the first CISO in the federal government. And he's starting to see chatter now with the agencies that they're adopting things, that they're actually looking to adopt some of the provisions in that EO or that executive order, which is a good trend. And we'll be curious to see now how that ripples into the private sector. So right now they're like looking at it and saying, well, that's okay. I'm still going to, I'm doing what I'm doing around MITRE ATT&CK or NIST or ISO or what have you. And we'll wait and see on the rest. James, what do you think?
Well, overall, I think this executive order it's definitely a step in the right direction. I find that it's clear, it's prescriptive, it's relevant to the current environment. It also keeps in mind near long-term future as well. While its implementation across multiple federal departments and their cascading effects on federal vendors and hopefully the entire software ecosystem remains to be seen, I appreciate the initiatives introduced as part of the executive order. But I think, I think it's expected that the U.S. government's going to ramp up efforts to strengthen its cybersecurity. We can expect states to continue to legislate and to regulate in this area. All businesses, including federal contractors, likely are going to experience pressure, I think, to evaluate data privacy and security threats and vulnerabilities and adopt measures to address these risks and to improve compliance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I do also think it's a good starting point, and also having the states, the local counties, cities, just kind of something to look up to and go, okay, this is what we need to start doing. Because really it has to go all the way down to the local cities and counties and the states per se. So
yeah,
I think
it's going to take time.
If I might add, just to pile on, and Nick, I think you're absolutely right. The other thing that I think folks need to really be thinking about, and there are some that are going to say this doesn't apply to me, is CMMC.
Yes.
And historically, it's primarily the focus of the defense industrial base and anybody who's calling on the DoD or supplying them. But there is absolutely a ripple effect into the supply chain, and anybody who's doing business with the DIB, they're going to be expected to be held accountable to that standard. So if you're in any way touching that sector, then this is something. And by the way, it's a very good standard or a set of standards, something worth looking at for sure.
And if someone doesn't know what CMMC is, it's the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, specifically for manufacturers that are working with the Department of Justice or want to work with Department of Justice. Yeah, and some of our contacts are also saying that a lot of the government agencies are going to be adopting that, to your point. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I know that there was a poll question. Kyle, do we have the results of the poll question about the executive order?
Yeah, so it looks like most companies are taking the executive order very seriously. 63% voted for very serious, 38% somewhat serious, nobody voted for not serious at all.
That's good news. That is good news. We're getting the word out there. At least the word here is getting out there. So we have one more question. Our last question for everyone, and I'm going to start with Nick. What does the future of information and cybersecurity look like, in your opinion?
Wow. That to me, there's so much transformation going on first, right? And foremost, there's so much between, the cloud in general, and then we have AI, machine learning, you name it. And, the changes that are happening kind of in the software, world per se as well. And I want to kind of go back to what Dan said, kind of in the whole DevOps process. I think what we're going to find in the future, security is going to be built into every facet, every corner of what we do as a business going forward. So from development to, how maybe AI, how, machine learning is built and designed. I think it's just going to, kind of the OSI model. I think there may be kind of a whole restructure and thought out process. And it's not going to happen overnight. It definitely isn't. But I really think there's going to be a shift in the way, not only businesses in our industry and software and development and kind of the cloud, but I think there's going to be a transformation from a security standpoint, but it's going to be an evolution as well too. So, but it's going to be in security, I do believe, in the next 5 to 10 years will be in every facet of the business. I definitely believe that.
Excellent. James.
Well, I think there's a lot as far as the future. I mean, first of all, I think that hackers are going to continue to be more sophisticated. They're going to use new methods and new tools to gain access to confidential information. I think that small and medium-sized businesses are going to be targeted more often. As many of these businesses, they lack information security knowledge and resources. And so it makes them ideal targets.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be more regulation. You've got GDPR in Europe. You've got CCPA in California, these new privacy acts. So I think there's going to be more of that's going to be coming out. The reality is technology is going to continue to evolve. It's going to provide hackers with basically an even larger attack surface. It used to be where they would attack your on-premise infrastructure. Now you're all over. There is no one particular area. There's a complete remote connectivity, cloud, and that sort of thing. So there's going to be more vulnerabilities to exploit. So there's going to be a lot of that. To defend against these cyber attacks, companies are going to need to use more effective security solutions with new innovative approaches, that sort of thing. Companies might have to assess their cybersecurity as seen from, let's say, a hacker's point of view. Okay. So it's big. And even, the goal's going to be not only to increase cyber resilience internally within their own company, but also across the company's, their entire supply chain. So it's a lot of added complexity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. This is boy, it's tough to look into the crystal ball on this one, but some of the things that I heard just both Nick and James mention there. I think machine learning, we'll see certainly increased adoption of that. And if for no other reason, out of just sheer necessity, we don't have the workforce that we need right now. This is one of the other major vexing problems is getting a trained workforce all the way up to the CISO. And so building the next generation of cyber experts, and even looking outside of the traditional backgrounds to recruit them is going to be essential. But we're still going to deal with this period of time here where we're playing catch up. I forget there's statistics on how many open jobs there are all over the world, and there's just not enough supply. So we need things like machine learning and automation to help step in to really kind of help plug some of those capability gaps. I think the other thing that is we're going to see more complexity, but I think one of the things that we all have to do is we have to bind together. I know our customers hold us accountable. When SolarWinds hit, we responded to many third-party risk assessments specifically related to the topic of SolarWinds and how we secure our customer data and our code. And so I do think there's also this notion of holding your ecosystem of suppliers and partners accountable. And the last thing is, and I'm ever hopeful on this, is that we do finally crack the code in the future here on the private-public partnership. Yeah. We've talked about it for years. There needs to be better cooperation, coordination between what CISA and the FBI and those organizations are aware of, and then what, of course, a lot of the various intelligence organizations, even Cisco's Talos organization. And to be clear, we cooperate a lot with those orgs, but I think we still have a lot of room for improvement. Hopefully that helps, Kristen.
No, it does. That was wonderful. It just sounds like it's not going away. I think there's this idea, it's like we're going to conquer it and it will go away forever, but there's too much money in it for organized crime. It's evolving, and sounds like we're still playing catch up from the business community, and even our grandmas and grandpas and moms and dads are getting hacked too, the individual. So it doesn't sound like it's going away anytime soon. Well, I don't know. That was wonderful. I don't know if we have any questions in the chat. Kyle, do we have any questions here?
No questions right now. If anyone has them, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A.
Okay. And I think there's another poll question. So let's do one more poll. All right. On the culture. And what is that coming in at?
Right now, mostly for yes, a strong culture. We're seeing a little bit on somewhat and nothing for no culture. So right now it's about 64%, 67% for a strong culture, 30% for somewhat of a culture.
Well, I imagine if they're here, they're interested in security. So, they're working on their culture. Well, I think that's really all we have today. I'm going to give you back the rest of your time. Nick, Dan, James, Kyle, thank you so much. Thanks for your insight. I know if somebody wants to reach out to any one of us, maybe we can send a follow-up email, Kyle, with contact information if someone has more questions, comments, concerns. They want to learn more maybe about this AI that Dan is talking about. Absolutely. What's that machine learning going to look like in the future? Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for Tech Talks, Why Cybersecurity Programs Fail. I hope you learned as much as I did. And we look forward to seeing you at the next Tech Talks event. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Krista. Thank you, team.
Thank you.
Have a great day.